I'm here in the capital of the Northwest Territories, Canada, where the flags of the 33 communities that make up the Northwest Territories proudly fly. Or do they? Upon closer inspection, what initially seems to be a simple flag display actually has a lot of drama behind it, including multiple communities with conflict over what the real flag is, one community with no flag, and one community forgotten entirely.
And today, we're going to take a deep dive into the community flags of the Northwest Territories in 3 parts. In part 1, we will look at the community flags in the most 2018 way possible, a flag tier list. Along the way, we will see which of the 33 communities replied to my flag-related correspondence. Spoiler alert, it was not many of them. And we will discuss the 4 communities where there are multiple competing community flags. In part 2, we will explore the forgotten community that was completely left off of the flag map and display, and talk about how the government was alerted to this during the making of this video and now promises action. And finally, in part 3, we will look at the unresolved missing flag. This is for a community that is mentioned on the flag map, but seemingly forgotten otherwise, and that has not yet gotten the attention of the MLAs or the community, despite my efforts while making this video. In preparation for making this video, I used the Northwest Territories government contact list for the 33 communities, which meant that I sent 32 emails to the community contacts and 1 letter. Good on Wrigley for decreasing their administrative burden by providing only a mailing address and not an email. These flags will be put on the tier list based on completely arbitrary assessments, with the only solid rule being that you move up a tier if your community replied to my email or letter. We will get started with Sache Harbor. This flag has a lot going on, but I really do like the whales and the sailboat and how the blue matches the blue bars, so this is a solid B tier flag. Next is Ipavec, a community that the federal government tried to move to what is now Inuvik in 1958, but they never say die, so it continues to flourish as a modern town, one located far away from the hustle and bustle of Inuvik, that being a direct quote from their website. For some reason, the University of Alberta Archives has this yellow and black flag, but I couldn't find any more information about that, and the Ipavec community contact didn't reply to my email. Next is Inuvik. This is a D tier flag. I'm sorry, Inuvik. I understand it's meant to show unity with a house, teepee, and igloo, but it just isn't a good flag. It looks retro, but not in a good way. Now on to Tuktoyaktuk with an incredible flag, some definite S tier material here. It's uncluttered, shows the midnight sun and someone playing a drum. Great flag. There is some mention online that they might be trying to change their flag instead to this. I really hope that that isn't the case, but they didn't reply to my email to confirm one way or the other. Now moving to Pattke, which unfortunately is a D tier flag with word art and clip art on a map. It's not great, but I do like the polar bear. Yellowknife comes next with this flag that is simpler but not great, landing it on the C tier. No one has been able to tell me why so many of these communities choose the blue bars in this Canadian Pale design, and I also didn't get a reply to my email from Yellowknife, so I still don't know. Fort McPherson is next. They have a nice moose, setting sun, and they get points for deviating from that classic Canadian Pale design. But all that text keeps them from making it to the B tier, so this is a C tier flag. Colville Lake's flag has art that is nice and not too complex, and has some very small text. B tier flag. Next is Fort Good Hope. I quite like the art, but I am not fond of the word art font choice and this amount of text on it, so this has to be a C tier flag. With Norman Wells, we now have reached our first flag controversy. Let's first get this on the board though. This is an A tier flag. Art, but it's relatively simple and represents the community well. Text, but fairly minimal. Strangely though, there are actually two different versions of this flag, one with Town of Norman Wells and one with Norman Wells NWT. I could certainly see how that rebranding could be useful if the flag's being flown outside of the Northwest Territories, but what no one has been able to explain to me is the color change on the oil rig. The town didn't reply to my email, but given what's going on there right now, I think we can probably give them a pass on this. Sigachik is next, which would have been a D tier flag, but they move up to the C tier flag because they replied to my email, which was asking what font appears on their flag, and they weren't sure. But further investigation suggests that this is Bluff Regular. Next comes Delaney, where we have another community with a question of which is the real flag. We have what is flying near the legislature, but some sources say that this is actually the real flag. I hope that the original one flying outside the legislature stays as the real flag. With the complexity and the text, it may only be a C tier flag, but it is still certainly better than the possible new flag. They also didn't reply to my email asking about this possible new flag. Next up is Wequity. I really like the art with the wolf and the caribou. It's a bit complex for a flag in my opinion and loses points for the text, so this is a B tier flag. Mexico has made a big upgrade from their previous flag, and they now have this solid S tier flag that is simple and does not have any text on it. Well done, Mexico, in the S tier. Toledo, unfortunately, is quite the opposite, with barely legible Times New Roman text in what is a D tier flag. Gamity has a caribou and mountain, and thankfully no text. Why the green bars? I'm not sure since they didn't reply to my email, but still, this is a decent B tier flag. Wati is another community with two flag possibilities. I'm going with this one that is on display near the legislature, even though there is some suggestion that this is instead the new flag. They lose points for complexity, but get points for the lack of text, so this falls in the middle as a B tier flag. Yellowknife is next with their C tier flag. It's too complex, there's too much text, and the text is so small. The only thing that saves them from the D tier is that I do kind of like the blue and yellow bars. Moving next to Fort Simpson, we have this B tier flag. It could almost make it to the A tier if it weren't for the text. But because the speaker who was the MLA involved in fixing a maroon version of this flag that was being used in error, and he replied to my email, we actually moved this up to the A tier. Unfortunately, he had no additional insight into how an error like that would have been able to happen. Wrigley has this unique B tier flag. They get points for the quality of the art and breaking with the tradition of the Canadian pale style flags that so many of the communities have. They are the only community of the 33 without an email contact, so I wrote a handwritten letter to the chief and did not receive a reply. Next is Lutzelke with this flag with a light blue Canadian pale design that unfortunately looks faded compared to its dark blue counterparts. I do like the art, but it's also a bit hard to appreciate the bald eagle in this light color. It also loses points for text, ultimately landing this flag in the C tier, but with potential to be an A tier flag without the text and with some darker colors for better visibility. Jean Marie River loses points for text and complexity, but I do like the art, so it ends up being a C tier flag. Similarly, Kikiza has a complex flag with text, but again, the art saves it from the D or E tier, so this is a C tier flag. Detta comes next with this A tier flag. Yes, it should lose points for complexity and text, but I like that it isn't the Canadian Pale design and the art is big enough to appreciate when the flag is being flown. For a B tier flag, we next have Fort Liard. Losing points for text, but otherwise it's a relatively simple flag with decent art. Online photos can be found with a version of this with a darker blue bar on one side and green on the other. I emailed to ask about this, and the senior administrative officer replied, not answering my question directly, but at least providing precise details of the current flag colors. And based on the rule of upping a tier if they replied, that moves Fort Liard into the A tier. Pattke is a C tier flag with too much text and too many ovals. Interestingly, their blue bars seem lighter than most, but I can't tell you anything more about that since they didn't reply to my email. Fort Providence also uses a similar light blue in their D tier flag that is too complex and has too much text. Enterprise has a B tier flag that could be A tier if the colors on the bars lined up with the color used on the local badge. So close. Moving now to another community with some questions over which is the real flag, we go to Hay River. While they may be the hub of the North, I think their flag would be better off without that being stated on it in text. Even though it feels a little bit 80s, I do like the logo making this an A tier flag. Unfortunately for Hay River, it seems that they've been flying other flags that, if they're making the change, would be quite a downgrade from this flag. They didn't reply to my email looking for more information on their potential flag change. Fort Smith used this wonderful A tier flag at Expo 86, but it seems like this was never their true flag, and instead they are using this. With all that text on the solid green background, this would be a D tier flag. But they replied to my email with more flag information than anyone else, which at least moves them up to the C tier. Next is Fort Resolution, with no text, a moose, the aurora, and dark green in the local badge that matches the bars. This would have been an A tier flag, but they replied to my email, which moves them up into the S tier. And lastly, we need to make mention of my favorite flag of Northwest Territories, communities. And I say communities plural, as this is the Titcho flag for the communities of Betchiko, Wati, Gamati, and Wekwiti, each represented in red on this flag, along with the river flowing and the sunrise and North Star. There is so much on this flag, but it doesn't end up feeling cluttered, and the colors are distinct but go together well, and it looks so good in photos being flown. This is clearly an S tier flag. When you take a walk down the flag display, you will see that there are only 32 flagpoles. And there's a territorial flag flying, so that means only 31 communities actually have flags flying as part of the display near the legislature. When looking at the map of flags for the display, there's actually only 32 communities shown. This means that one was completely forgotten and left off the map, and that community is the Katlodeche First Nation, or KFN. At first I wondered if they had been left off the map because of their reserve status, except that seems strange when they are listed in the contact list from the Government of the Northwest Territories, listing of community contacts, and it's always said that there are 33 communities that make up the Northwest Territories. Unfortunately, I didn't receive a reply from KFN, but after reaching out to the Hay River South MLA Vince McKay, I learned that apparently KFN was not left off of the map and out of the display completely by design, but rather by mistake. How exactly that happened isn't clear, but they assure me that this is now going to be corrected, and I look forward to seeing the KFN flag flying near the legislature in Yellowknife. There is one more missing flag that has not yet been resolved. Nahanni Butte is mentioned on the flag map, but with a blank flag, and it is not included in the flag display. But searching online suggests that they do have a flag, even available for purchase. So it's very unclear what happened here and how this mistake was made. And it's not something that I was able to get to the bottom of because I didn't hear back from the community or from the MLA I contacted about this. So we just don't know.
Thank you for joining me for this look at the community flags of the Northwest Territories. And hopefully, if the MLA see this video, the flags of Nahanni Butte and KFN will soon be flying.